There is one part of your house that has exactly one job: to kill the power before your wiring gets hot enough to start a fire. It sits in a gray metal box in your basement or garage, and you have probably not looked at it in years. And if the name on that box is Federal Pacific, Stab-Lok, or Federal Pioneer, there is a real chance that the single device standing between your family and an electrical fire has never once done its job, and never will. Today I am going to show you how a breaker fails to trip, why these panels ended up in millions of homes, and the part nobody told you, which is that the reason this happened is far worse than a simple defect. Picture the inside of that panel. A row of little switches, each labeled in faded pen: kitchen, dryer, upstairs bedrooms. Every one is a circuit breaker, and the promise of a breaker is simple. When a circuit pulls more electricity than its wire can safely carry, the breaker is supposed to snap off in under 2 minutes and cut the power before the wire cooks the insulation around it. That's the entire safety system hiding in your wall. Electricians have a grim phrase for the Federal Pacific version. They don't call it broken. They call it dormant, because a breaker that fails to trip gives you no warning, no flicker, no smell, no tripped switch to reset. It just quietly does nothing, while the wire behind your drywall climbs past 200 degrees, which is exactly why what's happening inside that panel matters far more than anything you can see from your living room. Start with how the breaker attaches, because the name Stab-Lok is a clue most people walk past. The breaker doesn't bolt in, it stabs in, clipping onto a metal bar called the bus bar that carries the home's current. Here's the problem. That stab connection loosens over time. A loose electrical connection creates resistance. Resistance at high current creates heat, right at the point where the breaker is supposed to be sensing trouble. So the very mechanism meant to protect you is slowly baking the part inside it that decides when to trip. Engineers call this a degrading connection, which means the breaker doesn't just start unreliable. It gets worse every year it sits there. The longer it's been on your wall, the less likely it is to ever save you. A connection that runs hot is only the setup. The real scandal is what happens when that breaker is finally asked to do the one thing it exists for. So put one of these breakers on a bench and overload it on purpose, the way it will be overloaded the night something actually goes wrong. A properly functioning breaker, any normal brand, fails to trip less than 1/100% of the time. It is one of the most reliable safety devices ever mass-produced. Now the Federal Pacific numbers. When the materials engineer Dr. Jesse Ehrenstein ran the tests that became the backbone of this case, 51% of the Stab-Lok breakers failed to trip. Across CPSC and independent testing, failure rates ran as high as 74%, with up to 80% showing critical safety failures. You are not looking at a slightly worse breaker. You are looking at a coin flip on whether the fire prevention device in your home prevents anything at all. Some do not trip at 135% of rated load, which is the legal threshold. Some jam shut and do not trip at any load, sitting closed while the circuit glows. And this is the part I had to sit with myself. The failure that should terrify you is not even the breaker. It is the stamp on the front of the panel. That brings me to the part I have been building toward, because it is the line every homeowner says, and it is the most dangerous sentence in this story. It has worked fine for 40 years. Here's what an honest electrician will tell you. It hasn't been working. It has been dormant. A breaker that never trips looks identical to one that works perfectly, right up until the night you need it. And on that night, there is a fault in the wall, and the thing meant to stop, the fire, simply sits there. The panel never met the minimum safety standard. Not last year, not in 1975, not the day it was installed. 40 quiet years is not proof it is safe. It is proof you have not had your emergency yet. And by the statistical modeling built from fire reports, those emergencies add up to as many as 2,800 house fires, around 13 deaths, and $40 million in property damage every year in the United States alone. So why is a device this dangerous still legally sitting in millions of homes? The answer has nothing to do with engineering. So who is responsible? The breaker didn't fail you. It was never built to pass. To carry the Underwriters Laboratories safety listing, a product has to trip reliably in front of an inspector. Federal Pacific reportedly used a remote switch to manually trip the breakers during those tests, masking the fact that the real mechanisms were jamming. In 1982, its parent company, Reliance Electric, acknowledged in an SEC filing that the listing had been improperly obtained, and Underwriters Laboratories stripped the certification. Years later, a New Jersey court ruled the company had knowingly distributed breakers that were never tested to meet the standard printed on their own label. The original homeowners' compensation for a fire hazard bolted to their wall? $500 a panel. But here's the second villain, the one that got under my skin the deeper I dug. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, the federal body whose entire job is to pull deadly products out of American homes, investigated this, confirmed the failures, and then in 1983 closed the case, citing a limited budget, no recall. They knew, and they walked away. And that is the only reason this panel is still legal in your house right now. So what do? Number 3, stop trusting your own eyes and get a licensed electrician to positively identify the panel, because saying it looks fine is the trap. Number 2, do not let anyone sell you a cheap fix that swaps in replacement breakers. Mixing breakers into that panel was never UL tested, and the bus bar itself is part of the hazard. It is the whole panel or nothing. And number 1, the counterintuitive one. If you are buying a home and the inspector flags Federal Pacific, do not panic and walk. Use it. The fix is known and finite, roughly $1,500 to $3,200 for a same-size replacement, and it is more with a service upgrade. Deduct it from the offer and replace it the day you get the keys. The seller has been living on borrowed time. You do not have to. And whether you are buying or you have lived there 20 years, do one thing tonight. Walk to that panel and read the label. Federal Pacific, FPE, Stab-Lok, Federal Pioneer. If you see any of those names, you found it. Here is the line to walk away with. A circuit breaker is the one part of your house that is only worth anything in the worst moment of your life. And Federal Pacific built one that clocks out right when that moment arrives. It was never working. It was waiting. Next week, we are opening the wall itself, because there is a type of wiring in millions of homes built in the 1960s and the 1970s that the insurance industry quietly treats as a fire risk all on its own, and most owners have no idea it is behind their plaster. We are naming it. Subscribe so you do not miss it.